The courtroom fell silent. Every eye locked on Elon Musk as he stood alone. No high-priced lawyer beside him. Just the man, his mind, and a smirk that would later shake the very pillars of the court. "This court is not a TED Talk, Mr. Musk," Judge Frank Caprio said with a raised brow. But Elon didn't blink. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small notebook, and calmly opened to a tabbed page. "What I'm about to present," he said, "is not a defense. It's a lesson in truth." Gasps swept the room. A corporate attorney bolted upright, whispering to an aide. Judge Caprio leaned back, his eyes narrowing. What had started as a simple traffic summons was about to explode into a legal showdown, exposing loopholes, local corruption, and a man misunderstood even by the law itself. Stick around. You're about to witness not just justice, but genius. That morning, the Providence Municipal Courtroom carried the same familiar mix of low murmurs, tired expressions, and the soft shuffling of papers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the linoleum floor. People clutched their tickets like lifelines, summoned here not for crimes of passion or violence, but for the mundane infractions of everyday life. A teenager who had parked in front of a fire hydrant nudged the bailiff with a grin. "Think the judge will go easy on me if I tell him my cat was giving birth?" The bailiff didn't even blink. "Depends on if your cat was driving." A mother with 2 young children whispered to herself while flipping through a folder filled with receipts and photographs. She clutched them as if each page might spare her from a fine. One child tugged at her sleeve, the other played with a cracked plastic toy. It was all so routine until the double doors at the rear of the courtroom creaked open. And then everything stopped. In walked Elon Musk. Not the Elon Musk of magazine covers, red carpets, or Twitter theatrics. No bodyguards flanked him, no cameras followed. He wore a simple charcoal gray turtleneck and well-fitted slacks, a far cry from the suits and ties that adorned many in court that day. His presence was understated, but unmistakable. The room shifted. A ripple passed through the benches like a wave through still water. "That's him." "No way. What is he doing here?" Even the judge's clerk raised an eyebrow. Musk's gait was confident, not arrogant, as if walking into a boardroom or preparing to pitch an idea to NASA. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the courtroom, not with judgment, but with calculation, taking in the walls, the benches, the people, as though he were building a mental model in real time. He offered a nod to the bailiff, then made his way to the front bench and quietly took a seat. There was no announcement, no spectacle, just a collective sense of disbelief hanging in the air like mist. Names were called, cases processed, but all eyes drifted to Musk. Even those trying not to look found themselves stealing glances. Finally, his name echoed across the room. "Elon Musk," the clerk called. He stood, smooth and deliberate, buttoning his jacket with a motion that spoke of decades of experience in high-stakes situations. Behind the bench, Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward, peering over the top of his glasses. His expression, a blend of curiosity and caution, betrayed even his seasoned composure. "Elon Musk," he repeated, as if verifying reality itself. "Yes, Your Honor," came the calm reply. There was no flair in Musk's tone, just certainty, composure. A voice that had launched rockets and dodged shareholder revolts now addressed a judge over a traffic summons. Judge Caprio raised a single brow. "You're here over a red light citation, a parking infraction, and, wait, trespassing?" He thumbed through the thin manila folder before him, a bemused smile forming at the corners of his mouth. A quiet chuckle rose from the courtroom. The absurdity of it all, one of the wealthiest, most powerful men on earth, here over what amounted to a trifecta of petty municipal violations, was too much to ignore. Musk didn't flinch. "I believe there's more to the story, Your Honor," he said, his voice low but clear. Judge Caprio tapped his gavel once, a soft talk echoing in the courtroom. "Oh, I'm sure there is," he replied, the twinkle in his eye returning. "Let's hear it then." With that, the air thickened with anticipation. The courtroom, for once, wasn't just a place of bureaucracy. It had become a theater of curiosity. Everyone leaned in, and Elon Musk was ready to tell his story. Judge Frank Caprio tapped his gavel lightly, calling the courtroom to order. The case before him was, on the surface, simple. A red light violation involving a Tesla, followed by a parking ticket and an unusual trespassing charge. But as the hearing began, it was clear there was much more beneath the surface. "Mr. Musk," the judge began, "your Tesla allegedly ran a red light near Brown University's engineering hall during a software test. Let's start there." A large screen flickered to life, showing a grainy but unmistakable photograph of a sleek Tesla Model S moving through an intersection. The traffic light glowed a solid red as the vehicle passed through. Caprio pointed at the image. "Is this your car?" Elon Musk nodded calmly. "Yes, Your Honor. That's my vehicle." "And were you driving it?" Musk's lips curved into a slight smile. It was operating on autonomous mode. The judge raised a brow, his voice tinged with skepticism, but a hint of amusement as well. "So, you're telling this court your car drove itself right through a red light?" "Precisely," Musk replied evenly. A ripple of muffled laughter spread through the courtroom, even from the gallery of everyday people waiting their turn. The idea that a billionaire tech CEO was facing a traffic citation because his self-driving car made a mistake was almost surreal. Caprio held up a thick, official-looking report from the city's traffic camera department. "Here's what the city says. The vehicle's autonomous system malfunctioned during a university-approved demonstration. Is that accurate?" Musk nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. The test was sanctioned by Brown University's engineering department. During the test, the car's system encountered an emergency override initiated remotely by a city technician." The judge's expression shifted subtly, the skepticism giving way to genuine interest. "An emergency override?" Musk continued. "We submitted detailed logs of the override protocol timestamps to the Department of Transportation. Those logs correspond exactly with the moment the traffic signal began a pedestrian crossing reset. The system prioritized pedestrian safety and halted the vehicle, but unfortunately, the timing caused the car to breach the light." Judge Caprio rubbed his chin thoughtfully, eyes narrowing. "Interesting. So the city's own intervention caused the infraction." "That is correct, Your Honor." Caprio nodded slowly. "All right, let's move on. What about the parking violation?" Musk's eyes shifted briefly to the bailiff, who held a citation for a no-standing violation. "My assistant parked the vehicle," he explained. "I accept responsibility, but the signage indicating no standing was removed 2 days prior due to sidewalk maintenance." The judge looked to the city enforcement officer, who confirmed this detail. "Yes, Your Honor. The signs were taken down for construction and not replaced." "Well," Caprio mused, "that's a gray area." The courtroom was quiet as the judge turned to the last charge. "And the trespassing?" Elon's tone grew solemn. "I entered a restricted city data vault to retrieve sensor data critical for diagnosing the failure of the municipal network." The judge blinked. "You broke in?" Musk shook his head slowly. "Not exactly. I have authorized clearance through the Urban Transportation Coalition. They granted me classified access in 2022. The courtroom's atmosphere thickened with silence. People exchanged glances, clearly surprised. Even Judge Caprio blinked slowly, absorbing this unexpected information. "Mr. Musk, I'm aware your companies often work hand in hand with municipal agencies on transportation infrastructure," Caprio said thoughtfully. "But entering restricted city property without express notice to local authorities is a serious matter." Musk nodded. "I understand, Your Honor. But the city's sensor network was malfunctioning. Vital data wasn't being shared, which jeopardized public safety. I used my credentials to access the vault and retrieve the missing data." The judge tapped his fingers on the desk, weighing the explanation. "It seems you acted in what you believed was the public interest, but protocol still matters." "Yes, sir," Musk agreed. "I am prepared to face the consequences, but I hope the context matters in your consideration." The room remained quiet. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair and regarded Musk with an expression equal parts stern and curious. The story behind these simple citations was far from ordinary, and the courtroom was now fully engaged. The courtroom had settled into a rhythm. Everyone expected Elon Musk to defend, or at least explain, the technicalities of his parking ticket, his Tesla's red light violation, and the trespassing charge. But then, something shifted. Musk straightened in his seat, his eyes locking with Judge Caprio's in a moment that felt charged with quiet intensity. "I didn't come here to argue minor charges," he began, his voice measured but firm. "I came here because I believe something much bigger is broken." The judge raised a skeptical eyebrow, signaling Musk to continue. "This citation, this entire proceeding, it isn't really about a car or a parking ticket or trespassing," Musk said, pausing to let the weight of his words sink in. "It's about what happens when bureaucracy lags behind technology, when outdated systems slow down innovation instead of supporting it." He leaned forward slightly, his tone softening as if sharing a personal story rather than delivering a courtroom argument. "There are at least a dozen startups right here in Providence, right now, trying to solve the very problems your traffic cameras and city infrastructure are flagging. But every time one of these companies tries to file for city access, they hit a wall. They're stonewalled, delayed, or worse, they're fined for trying to help." Musk's eyes scanned the room, and for the first time, the murmurs that had accompanied his entrance were replaced by a quiet attentiveness. Judge Caprio's face softened, his curiosity deepening. Elon reached down beside the stand and placed a thick folder gently on the wooden surface. "These are names, companies, emails from young engineers, just like I once was, begging for a chance, begging for help," Musk explained, his voice taking on a nostalgic, almost vulnerable tone. "I didn't come here as Elon Musk, billionaire entrepreneur. I came as someone who was once 22 years old, broke, and desperate to be heard." The room shifted. The usual formalities and distance melted away. Suddenly, the billionaire was no longer a distant figure of wealth and power. He became a stand-in for every dreamer who had ever been crushed by red tape or penalized for trying to build the future. A woman near the back, clutching her own folder, wiped a tear quietly. Others exchanged looks, empathy crossing the usual social divides between the wealthy and the everyday citizen. Judge Caprio studied the folder, then looked back up. "So what you're saying is that this isn't just about you or your car. It's about a system that's failing those trying to innovate, to make things better for all of us." "Yes, Your Honor," Musk said quietly. "And it's not just about technology. It's about the people behind that technology, the engineers, the coders, the dreamers, being caught in a system that too often punishes progress instead of fostering it." The courtroom remained still, as if collectively holding its breath. The focus had shifted. What began as a simple traffic violation hearing was now a quiet call for reform, for understanding, for change. Judge Caprio's expression grew thoughtful. The layers of the case were unfolding in unexpected ways. It was no longer just about tickets or trespassing. It was about the future of innovation itself, and the responsibility society holds to nurture it rather than stifle it. The silence stretched as Musk waited, his gaze steady but open, inviting the court and the city to listen not just to a man, but to the ideas and people he represented. Judge Frank Caprio leaned back in his chair, the familiar creak of the worn leather breaking the courtroom's heavy silence. The room, usually filled with light-hearted exchanges or brisk, no-nonsense proceedings, now felt charged with a gravity seldom seen. People shifted quietly in their seats, eyes fixed on the judge, waiting for what might come next. Before him lay the thick folder Elon Musk had placed on the stand, now open, its contents spilling over the edges. Caprio carefully flipped through the pages, his fingers tracing highlighted emails, letters of rejection stamped with official seals, and detailed notes from various permit departments. Each document seemed to tell a story of frustration, of young engineers repeatedly turned away, their innovation caught in red tape. The judge's face was thoughtful, eyes scanning, reflecting. Finally, he looked up at Musk with a measured calm that carried the weight of experience and fairness. "Mr. Musk," Caprio began, his voice softer than usual but still resonant with authority, "I don't usually get political in this room. My role here is to weigh facts, laws, and circumstances without bias. But it seems that what's on trial today isn't just your car or your tickets." He paused, scanning the courtroom and then addressing everyone present. "It's the system, the very system that sometimes can't, or won't, recognize what it's seeing right in front of it." His gaze rested on the faces in the gallery, the mother with her documents, the young man who joked with the bailiff, others who had come for their own reasons but now listened closely. "This man," Caprio continued, nodding slightly toward Musk, "does not need our sympathy. He's a billionaire with resources and influence beyond most of us. But the kids in these files, those engineers and dreamers trying to push forward the future, they just might." A murmur of quiet agreement rippled through the courtroom, underscoring the truth in the judge's words. Caprio set down the folder gently, his fingers steepled in front of him. His eyes met Musk's once more, conveying respect tempered with the weight of judicial responsibility. "I will need to think on this carefully," he said, voice steady but thoughtful. "This case raises questions not just about the letter of the law, but the spirit in which laws and policies are applied." He glanced around the room, as if including everyone present in the contemplation. "Technology moves fast, Mr. Musk, faster than most laws and regulations can keep up with. Our job here is not just to enforce rules, but to ensure justice, fairness that adapts to the changing world." The judge tapped his gavel lightly. "I ask everyone to bear with me as I consider the full picture. This is about more than just tickets and trespassing. It's about how we treat progress and those who dare to dream it into reality." A hush fell over the room, the usual noise of shifting papers and whispered conversations replaced by a solemn stillness. Elon Musk nodded appreciatively, his expression sincere. Judge Caprio rose slowly, signaling a brief recess. As the courtroom emptied, the weight of the moment lingered, an unspoken acknowledgement that sometimes justice requires more than rules. It demands understanding, empathy, and reflection. Outside the courtroom doors, the world continued to turn. But inside, something had shifted, quietly, profoundly, marking a moment when law, technology, and humanity intersected in the most unexpected of places. Just as the courtroom began to settle into the heavy silence left by Judge Caprio's reflective words, The courtroom doors opened once more. A city clerk, dressed in modest business attire, stepped inside hesitantly, clutching a small flash drive. "Your Honor," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of urgency, "I was told to deliver this to you." Judge Caprio nodded, his curiosity piqued. The clerk approached the bench and handed over the device. Caprio inserted the flash drive into the court's multimedia system, and the large screen behind him flickered to life. The first clip played, a crisp video showing Elon's Tesla gliding through the intersection near Brown University's engineering hall. The red light was clearly illuminated as the car passed through. The courtroom was silent again, until the camera angle changed. Seconds later, another camera's footage appeared, showing a fire truck speeding down a side street, flashing its emergency lights as it cut through the intersection. The timing was precise. The Tesla had moved forward not out of disregard for the law, but to clear the way for an emergency vehicle responding to a call. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even the city enforcement officer, who had remained composed until now, leaned forward, eyes narrowing as she watched the footage. Musk's voice broke the tension, calm and assured. "The AI made the right call," he said quietly. "Even if the light was red, the system recognized the emergency vehicle and chose to move the car to avoid obstructing it." Judge Caprio's eyes widened slightly in surprise. The new evidence added a critical dimension to the case, a nuance no photograph or citation could capture. Caprio turned to the trespassing charge. "And what about the claim you entered restricted property without permission?" Before Musk could answer, the clerk pressed play on another file. An email appeared on the screen, time-stamped, official, and unmistakable. It was Elon Musk's formal request for access to the city's sensor data vault, dated nearly a week before the incident. The request had been approved by city officials, but the records hadn't been properly updated to reflect that clearance. The courtroom murmured with renewed interest. The trespassing charge suddenly seemed less like an act of defiance and more an unfortunate bureaucratic oversight. Judge Caprio leaned forward, the lines of responsibility and fairness clearer now. "So, Mr. Musk was authorized to access the data. The city simply failed to update the records in time." The enforcement officer nodded slowly, acknowledging the mistake. Elon Musk allowed himself a brief, genuine smile, the kind of subtle relief that comes when truth breaks through the fog of misunderstanding. The judge took a moment to absorb the new information, his gavel poised but silent. "This changes the context significantly," Caprio said softly. "It reminds us all, especially those of us who work within systems, that details matter. And sometimes, justice depends on looking beyond the surface." The courtroom felt transformed. What had started as a routine citation hearing had evolved into a profound exploration of technology, responsibility, and the often frustrating gap between innovation and bureaucracy. Judge Caprio exchanged a meaningful glance with Musk, the unspoken understanding that this case was far from over, and that its resolution might carry lessons well beyond the courtroom walls. Judge Frank Caprio exhaled deeply, the kind of breath that carries both relief and resolve. The courtroom, still charged with the energy of new revelations, seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for his judgment. "This court," Caprio began slowly, his voice rich with years of experience and quiet humility, "has made mistakes before." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, weighty and sincere. "But not often do we see someone so publicly calm under so much noise and scrutiny." He turned his gaze directly to Elon Musk, who sat poised and attentive, the flicker of a respectful smile just touching his lips. "You may be a public figure, Mr. Musk," the judge continued, "but today you reminded us all of the responsibility we carry, not just as individuals, but as a society. The responsibility to be stewards of change, not just skeptics of it. The courtroom seemed to breathe as one. Even those who had initially viewed Musk's presence with disbelief now found themselves leaning in, captivated by the moment. Caprio stood slowly, the gravity of his decision settling over the room like a soft cloak. "The red light citation," he declared, "is dismissed." He gestured to the assistant city officer, who nodded in acknowledgement. "The parking violation," Caprio went on, "is waived due to improper signage that should never have been removed without notice." Heads in the courtroom subtly nodded, the sense of fairness palpable. "And the trespassing charge," Caprio said, looking back to Musk. "It is voided, as your clearance was indeed valid, and the city's failure to update records caused the confusion." A soft applause rippled through the gallery, brief but genuine, quickly hushed by the court's decorum. "But," Caprio added with a warm smile that softened the formality, "you owe us something too." Elon Musk tilted his head in curiosity, a faint glint of intrigue in his eyes. The judge smiled broadly now, a twinkle of gentle challenge lighting his face. "You're going to speak at our local high school next month," he said. "You'll show the students here what it means to challenge the system, with grace, humility, and persistence." Musk's smile deepened, and he nodded with sincere enthusiasm. "Gladly, Your Honor." A sense of hope filled the room, not just about the verdict, but about the future it hinted at. The case had become more than a legal proceeding. It was a story of bridging divides between wealth and everyday life, innovation and tradition, frustration and understanding. As the courtroom began to clear, the energy lingered, a reminder that even the smallest moments can become turning points when met with empathy and open minds. Judge Caprio gave a final nod to Elon Musk, and as the door closed behind the last of the spectators, a quiet sense of possibility settled over the Providence courthouse that day, an unspoken promise that the future could be built with both justice and heart. And just like that, the courtroom seemed to exhale. The tension that had filled the room moments before gave way to something far rarer: understanding. It was the kind of quiet that settles over a space when people realize they've witnessed more than a legal proceeding. They had glimpsed a moment of humanity. It wasn't about who Elon Musk was, the billionaire entrepreneur or the tech visionary. It was about who he chose to be in that room. Not a titan towering above the rest, nor a CEO demanding special treatment. Just a man who stood, unarmed by wealth or power, and made the system listen. Outside the courthouse, the world continued in its usual chaotic rhythm. Elon walked alone down the steps, without a press escort or flashing cameras. No reporters crowded around him, no microphones pushed forward. Just a kid on a bicycle, weaving through the crowd, shouted out in youthful admiration, "Hey, Elon, you're a legend." Musk turned, smiled warmly, raised his hand in a quiet wave, and kept walking, steady, unpretentious, human. In that small courtroom in Providence, justice wasn't just served, it evolved. It transformed from cold procedure into a living conversation about fairness, progress, and the courage it takes to challenge the rules without losing respect. And as the doors closed behind him, the promise lingered. Sometimes, the greatest victories come not from winning alone, but from opening a path for others to follow. This wasn't just another day in Judge Caprio's courtroom. It was a reminder that behind every case, there's a story, and sometimes a spark that can change the world. If this case moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story that might just change the way you see the world, one case at a time.